Washington. Former Trump White House strategist Steve Bannon was sentenced to 4 months in prison Friday, 3 months after his conviction on contempt of Congress charges for defying a subpoena from the Special House Committee investigating the January 6, 2021 Capitol attack. U.S. District Judge Carl Nichols granted a defense request that the flamboyant advisor to former President Donald Trump be allowed to remain free pending appeal. The Justice Department had sought a 6-month prison term for Bannon and recommended that he pay a maximum fine of $200,000 for his sustained bad faith. From the moment that the defendant, Stephen K. Bannon, accepted service of a subpoena from the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6 attack on the United States Capitol, he has pursued a bad faith strategy of defiance and contempt, prosecutors asserted in court documents in advance of Friday's sentencing hearing. On Friday, the judge recalled the violence of the Capitol attack and said the January 6 committee had every reason to investigate that day. Others must be deterred from committing similar crimes, he said. Bannon, who was also ordered to pay a $6,500 fee, left the courthouse after the ruling, but not before criticizing the Justice Department to a crowd of reporters. The American people are weighing and measuring what went on with the Justice Department, Bannon said before referring to the upcoming midterm elections. But Bannon mostly remained silent during the hearing, only telling the court, "My lawyers have spoken for me." His attorney, David Schoen, criticized the January 6 committee, which held a series of high-profile hearings on its findings this year, was illegitimate and said Bannon tried to act within the law. Quite frankly, Mr. Bannon should make no apology. No American should make an apology for the way Mr. Bannon proceeded in this case, Schoen said. Assistant U.S. Attorney Joseph Cooney said Bannon could not have committed a more malicious contempt of Congress in defying the subpoena. Throughout this entire case, the defendant has tried to make it all about politics and retribution, he said. This man, Stephen Bannon, should be treated like any other citizen. More. Trump ally Steve Bannon found guilty of contempt for defying January 6 committee subpoena. Former Trump White House senior strategist Steve Bannon arrives at federal court Friday in Washington, D.C. for sentencing. Bannon was found guilty by a federal jury of 2 counts of contempt of Congress after he refused to turn over documents or be interviewed by the House committee investigating the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. The House committee sought documents and testimony from the former Trump advisor, but Bannon flouted the committee's authority and ignored the subpoena's demands, prosecutors said. Throughout the pendency of this case, the defendant has exploited his notoriety, through courthouse press conferences and his War Room podcast, to display to the public the source of his bad faith refusal to comply with the committee's subpoena. A total disregard for government processes and the law, the government's filing stated. Through his public platforms, the defendant has used hyperbolic and sometimes violent rhetoric to disparage the committee's investigation, personally attack the committee's members, and ridicule the criminal justice system. While Bannon initially refused to comply with the panel's summons, citing a claim of executive privilege, prosecutors said Monday that the Trump operatives' actions were aimed at undermining the committee's efforts to investigate an historic attack on government. More. Above the law. Feds unveil contempt case against Steve Bannon. Defense claims case driven by politics. Here's a breakdown of his case. Evan Corcoran, right, and Lindsey Halligan, left, part of former U.S. President Donald Trump's legal team, leave the Paul G. Rogers Federal Building and Courthouse after a court hearing in West Palm Beach, Florida on September 1, 2022. Bannon's attorneys argued that a sentence of probation was more appropriate. The legal challenges advanced by Mr. Bannon were not meritless or frivolous and were aimed at protecting his constitutional rights, attorney Evan Corcoran argued in court documents. The sentencing hearing is not the only front of legal trouble facing Bannon. Last month, he pleaded not guilty in New York to state criminal charges involving an alleged fundraising scheme. Bannon and the We Build the Wall nonprofit organization are charged with 2 counts of money laundering, plus felony counts of conspiracy and scheme to defraud. Bannon and the group also face a misdemeanor count of conspiracy to defraud. There cannot be one set of rules for everyday people and another for the wealthy and powerful. We all must play by the same rules and must obey the law, New York Attorney General Letitia James said in a statement. More. Trump advisor Steve Bannon pleads not guilty in NY on charges related to border wall fund. The case is expected to echo aspects of a previous federal criminal case that accused Bannon and 3 co-defendants of conspiring to dupe donors who contributed more than $25 million to build a security wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. In the federal case, Trump pardoned Bannon in the closing days of his White House term, ending that case against him. Contributing. Kevin McCoy, Associated Press. This article originally appeared on USA Today. Steve Bannon sentenced to 4 months in prison for defying January 6 panel.